Let's do it. Got it.
G'day, ladies and gents. Welcome to this week's episode of This Is Your Line and Length. I'm your host, Aidan, joined here by regular Luke Kelly. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm going real well.
And we've also got this week's guest, Ben Lucas. How you doing, mate?
I'm good. I'm very well. Thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be here.
No
It's
problem
our
at
pleasure.
all. Thanks for coming on, mate. Now, before we get into things, could you give our listeners a bit of a rundown on who is Ben Lucas?
Sure. I describe myself as Australia's most generic bloke because I get mistaken for basically everyone. So if you think about generic white male that's like sort of sits in the average of everything, I consider myself the top of that average scale. So I'm 26 years old. I live on the northern beaches of Sydney. Generic bloke stuff. Love hanging out with my mates, drinking beers, playing sport, yada, 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 all that sort of stuff. I guess the reason that I'm here, or what's going to be most relevant that we talk about today, is I run a project called 2 Minute Mates. It's like a mental health project that I started about three and a half years ago, built off the concept that it only takes 2 minutes to check in on your mates. And it might be that conversation that can, spark something for them or make their day, or at the biggest end of the spectrum is, you could save a life. So that's my sort of passion project. I work in sort of marketing and media. So I'm a strategist. So I have a very analytical brain, which could be great or terrible for the rest of this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone hates talking about themselves, but I think that's probably the best spiel on me that I can give you.
I think going with Australia's most generic bloke is the best answer we've ever had to that.
That's what I'm striving for, because I reckon I was in high school and a girl I know actually made a Tumblr page. Remember Tumblr? Like,
yes.
For my doppelgangers and for people that look like me. And I would get like, people will send me photos of like blokes that they see out that they're like, oh, I thought this was you. And it's like some other guy, or people in like the background of TV commercials.
Yeah.
And like, even yesterday, I jumped on a work call, like an intro with the new team I'm working with, and a guy was like, mate, what's your background? Where are you from? I'm sure I know you. And I was like, you don't. I get this all the time. Let's move on. So it probably came across as a bit rude, but I'm just so used to it now.
I love it.
Mate,
it's a blessing and a curse.
Let's go back to 2 Minute Mates. Great cause that's all about starting this awesome conversation to check in with your mates. Was there something that prompted you to start this movement?
Yeah, there was. There was probably I guess there's two parts to my story. Let's call it that. There's like my own personal experience, but my own personal experience wasn't directly related to mental health. My personal experience is related to sort of hardship and adversity. And then I think that it wasn't until a couple of years later in hindsight that I realized if you go through any sort of adversity or hardship, there's going to be a mental strain that happens. And so mental health was something that I became aware of through that, but it wasn't necessarily a mental health episode. Like a lot of people in this space kind of, not that you have to come from one side or the other, but there's a lot of people that get into this stuff because of personal experience. I think I'd be lying if I said it was through personal experience. What actually happened was the turning point or the tipping point where I'd thought about, I wanted to do something. I wanted to sort of create accountability or start a project. Like I'm very entrepreneurial like that. And the tipping point was when I heard about a guy that was below me in school who had taken his own life. And I was I was 22 maybe at the time. And I just felt like it was something that I'd sat on for a while. And when I heard that news, I didn't know the guy that well. Like we had interactions, but I wouldn't say we were friends. But I just felt like as a 23-year-old guy who had been brought up in, a very privileged part of Sydney in the North Shore and Northern Beaches, that it shouldn't, like I just couldn't get my head around the fact that somebody could feel so low about themselves that they would get to that point. And I just wasn't willing to sit on the sidelines and not do anything about it. So I just decided that I wanted to address it. So I came up with this idea. I was like, how can I, that's the analytical brain. I kind of looked at it like a marketing problem. Like, what can I do that isn't being done already? And where I landed was this concept of a lot of mental health messaging or awareness is based on sort of like speak up if you're struggling. Like it's not weak to speak. That's the message we hear, which is fine. But I look at it and I go, statistically, that approach doesn't work because the male stereotype is, and there's data that proves this. Triple M did a survey in partnership with Beyond Blue, and it was like 70 to 80% of Australian males say they'll do anything for their mates. But out of the same people, less than 50% say they would tell a friend if something was going on. So you've got all these bravado guys that are like, yeah, mateship, I'll do anything for my friends, but I don't want to tell them if I'm struggling because I don't want to be a burden, or I don't know how to bring it up because we haven't been trained to do that. So I'm not here to speak to necessarily the people that are struggling, but if I can relate to any bloke that says they'll do, or any person, it's not just male skewed anymore. I started very male skewed just because I am absolutely not an expert in women, and men was easier in for me. Yeah. But it started with that concept of, if I say to somebody, hey, would you do anything for your mates? And they say, yeah, absolutely. And I'll go, then how come you haven't brought this up? Or how do you show them that you're accountable for how they feel? Or how do you take accountability for them? Because good, like, mateship is a value to me. Well, if the definition of mateship actually spawned, it's a war term. It came from, mateship was about being in the trenches with people that you had a bond with because you were fighting a war together, regardless of race, religion, or background. Like, mateship is Anzac spirit. That's what it is as a meaning. So for me, mateship is, we're friends. I'll do anything for you, even if it takes skin off my back, because, you know, I'm here for you. I'm supporting you. I'm accountable for you. And that's what a strong mateship bond is. So I started this I had a barbecue. I had like 10 people around, and I was like, this is my story. I sort of poured things out. People kind of freaked out. Like, Ben's invited us around for a barbecue and a couple of beers, and he's having a breakdown or something. Yeah. It was super tense. Like, it was super fucking tense. But then people were like, oh, actually, I see what you're saying here. You're saying that we know that you've been through stuff, but we've stopped talking about it because we feel like it's awkward. And you're saying we have not just the right to bring it up or talk about it, but like almost the responsibility to talk about it because we're friends, and that's what mates should do. So I put that message out there. This is 3.5 years ago, and it just really stuck with people. Like, that's why I'm still doing it, is because when you have a good idea, like in the marketing world, a phrase that I use in work is, a big idea isn't a big idea until the audience is on board. And so this didn't start as a big idea. It started as a simple thing. And then everybody that kind of comes in touch with it is like, I love this because it's different. It's not, it's easy to get on board, whether you're, you know, struggling or not. It's very hard to say, no, I don't give a shit about my mates. No one's really going to frame it like that. So that's a bit of the backstory of how it started, I suppose, and the approach that I'm taking.
Yeah. Benny, I absolutely love it. Like, the thing that I wrote down, and you mentioned it there, but I just want to, you know, restate it again so it sinks in for our audience, is that, and it's all over your website, 70% of blokes say they'll do anything for their mates, yet only 50% or 50% won't tell their mates if something is wrong. Like, it's pretty crazy. Like, it's wild.
Yeah, it is. And it's like wild, but not surprising. You can see it just makes sense. And we kind of, you understand why that's the case, but I just feel like, and I don't want to sound like I'm shitting on the mental health awareness space and whatever. I feel like I come at stuff from like a bit of an obscure approach or a non-traditional approch, because I see that there is so much happening in that space, and mental health awareness is at an all-time high, and that's great. But like I'm an implementer and a doer, and I'm like, it doesn't mean shit if we're not acting on it. So it's like, how can I create action in people? And I think for me, it highlights that if you're in a good space and you're looking after your mates, one, it makes your friendship stronger, but it actually makes that if something does hit the fan, that's how you've got the support network. That's how we make it so somebody feels like they can tell their mates about things or ask for help and confide in them, is because we've created a culture or an environment that allows it. Whereas currently, like, most guys or most people don't have a culture that allows them to feel like that's, you know, okay. And we don't practice it. So like, how would you know? Doing anything for the first time is fucking scary.
Yeah. There are so many similarities hearing you speak about why you started 2 Minute Mates and why I started Line and Length. You know, I think we've both got a deep love for our mates. Let's put it that way. Like, I can tell that you love your mates, and I absolutely love mine. And I think just from hearing you speak, you're like me, where it's less saying, more doing. And you're, you know, with 2 Minute Mates, actually in the trenches, having a crack, having these conversations instead of just it ain't weak to speak without.
Yeah, I think
putting shit on them. Yeah.
It's, for me, it is like, it's actually hard for me to articulate the feeling of love and commitment that I have to friends. And even like, if it expands to like, a mate of a mate is a mate of mine. Like if I'm hanging out with a group of people and I like know one person, I'm like immediately in, and I'm myself, and I give energy to people in a room. It's just how I am. It's how I've always been. I did an interview a while ago, probably like 2 years ago, with a mate who asked me, I've now blanked on what the question was, but it was basically like, what is not the meaning of life, but like, is that kind of thing? Like, what's your sort of meaning and purpose? And what I thought about for a week and I landed on was like, companionship was the word that I gave him. And I feel like where I find value in life, or where we all should find value, is in companionship. Like, everything is better when it's shared. And we're like, more and more, we're living in a society where we're losing that ability to connect with people and communicate. Like, we're so disconnected now, and we were disconnected way before COVID hit, and we all were social distancing. Like we live in this world on our screens and all that kind of stuff. In like this, to give a sporting analogy, like, I'm a shit ass footballer. Like, I play gridiron. So I play American football, like helmet and pads, so which is already weird in itself. But I'm 70 kilos ringing wet and 6 foot tall. Like, I'm a string bean, right? I was a good fast bowler when I was young, because I left arm in swing to the right hander. But that's another story. But I'm not a great footballer. But what I love about gridiron was, it's such a strategic game. I can have a bigger impact on a game vocally than I can as a physical presence. So like when I played rugby growing up, I was not great because I didn't have the size and the skill. But then when it came to gridiron, I felt like my impact could be broader because of like the stature or the power that that voice and communication holds in that game, right? And like what I have learned in kind of being really involved with a footy club and then running this mental health project at the same time, or what I've landed on, is that like mental health is a team sport. And I don't think anyone ever thinks of it that way. We think of it as this like super personal thing that we've got to figure out. And it is 100% a team game. And it's way fucking easier if you have a team of people that are communicating the same game plans, understanding people's strengths and weaknesses, helping people out. It's not this thing that we're all supposed to go and figure out by ourselves. Like we've tried that. It's not working. We've got to take a different approach.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, my sort of philosophy with Line and Length is, you know, embrace each other's mental health journey and learn from them. You know, that's what I've found we're doing, embracing each other's journey and learning from it, you know?
Yeah, I love it. It's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's why we connected when we got introed so quickly, right? You can just tell we're on the same sort of mind frame and
absolutely
on the same path.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'd like to go back to sort of you were talking about when you originally started 2 Minute Mates with the sort of barbecue with all of your friends.
Yeah.
You know, sort of getting up there and telling people about what you're going through is a harrowing experience for some, because they don't like to share that personal side of things. Was it difficult for you to do it? And then after you sort of told everyone what was going on, did you receive the same sort of stuff back where people were more willing to open up to you once you opened up to them?
Yeah. So I reckon, and to give more context, like the hardship that I mentioned, or like the sort of adversity that I had faced, was that my dad passed away when I was in high school. So he was sick for about 4 years. He had cancer. We were kind of told to like prepare for the worst when he got sick. Like they thought he'd be around for 9 months. He had bowel cancer, non-operable, so which is a pretty bad diagnosis. And he hung around for 4 years. So in the hindsight of like going through that, it's the most powerful like growth and learning experience that I possibly could have had, because I am so grateful for the time that I had, and it made everything honest and open and vulnerable. So I like could not be more grateful for the experience that I had. Sure, the outcome was terrible and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But it taught me so much. And so everybody that was there at that thing, and it was, I had picked a mix of people, so that like my cousin was there, some guys from footy, some guys from high school, like a couple of different groups, not just sort of one group of people. And they all knew that I had gone through that. And I'd probably had conversations with all of them about it. Like a lot of them knew my dad. And I think one of the things I touched on earlier is like when my dad was sick, people would say, mate, how's your dad going? Really, like, how's he going? Want to hear. And then he dies and no one wants to ask about it, or no one wants to mention it. Like, let's pretend it's not happened because we don't know how to address it. And so my whole approach was, and what I said there was like, you all know my dad died and none of you want to talk about it because like you don't know how to ask. And so what I'm saying is like, as mates, it's you need to, because like that's a big part of my life. And what I've always said is I don't want it to be a touchy subject that is forgotten about. Like I'm so proud of him and the person he was and how he raised me that I want to remember his legacy and be able to talk about those things. You need to keep those memories fresh. If no one asks you about them and you don't talk about it, you start to forget those things. You start to not be able to, like for me, what's really important is to hold on to the lessons that he taught me while he was here, because I won't have those lessons from a father for the rest of my life. Yeah. So if none of my mates want to understand that that's sort of where I'm at, it gets really difficult. And I think something that I always think about is when I tell somebody that story, they say, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear about your dad, but that's so great what you can do." I'm like, you don't have to say sorry. Like what I'm telling you is that it's not the kind of thing you need to say sorry for, because it should just be, I've established that it's something I want to talk about. It's not a heavy topic for me. It was for a long time, but I've been through the grieving process. I've done the work on myself. I've created a circle of trust where this is something that we talk about. But people default to sorry because they don't know what to say, because we're not taught or trained or practiced in how to address those things. It's like the default thing, and then people go, "Fuck, I don't know why I said sorry." Like it doesn't actually matter that you said sorry. That's just, it's like saying because you're trying to think about what to say.
Yeah.
To the second part, I didn't touch on that actually. I just realized was like what happened was I told that story, and then other guys started going like, "Yeah, look, hey, I've confided in you about this before, and really appreciated that, but I never told you." And then someone else said that I've actually been going through this and I haven't told anyone. And it was like these things start to come up, and then you realize like, well, if the stats are that 1 in 4 blokes will experience anxiety or depression or some sort of mental episode at any point in their life, and stats about how people are feeling at certain times are even higher, if you've got a group of 10 people, minimum 3 people are going to have some sort of significant thing going on. And almost everyone has something going on, because it's like, it's all relative to our own experience, right? Yeah. Like your dad doesn't have to pass away for it to be a big deal. It can be that you lost your job, or you split from a partner, or, sometimes you just have a shitty day. And we're really quick to go, "Oh, it could be worse." It's like the thing that everyone's heard the past 18 months, especially in COVID. But it's like, no, that's what's going on in your world. It makes it no less important than someone else's.
I love the way you worded that, relative to your experience. I'm writing that down. That's great.
It took me a long time to learn that. And
That's fantastic.
Heard that from other people, is like, we're so quick to like compare ourselves to everything, like to everyone else and whatever, like that it's like it's relative to your own experience. And so the way there's a good line that I've always sort of held on to is adversity breeds opportunity. So that's the way that I've taken my adversity, is how can I teach people the lessons that I've been through, so they don't have to go through the sort of life-defining moments that I've had.
Yep.
In order to learn those lessons. Like that's why we read fucking self-help books and stuff, to learn lessons from other people's experiences. Yeah. And so I think if I don't go through that experience, I don't have the knowledge or the wisdom or the ability to talk about the things that I have now. Yeah. Someone else goes through a different experience, they can relate or give me advice based on that experience that I don't have. Yeah. We've all got our own stuff going on. It's just like, if you don't talk about it or you don't share it, nobody knows.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I've just noticed through that conversation, we've naturally just touched on hardship, which is one of our Triple H questions. So I'm going to roll that naturally into the second one, which is, Benny Lucas, who's your hero?
This is one of the things I wrote notes on. We were saying before, because I'm such a sucker for overthinking these sort of things and trying to think of the best answer. And like at the end of the day, my dad's my hero, and like I shouldn't say that will never change. Obviously, that'll never change. But like I don't have to get too complicated. My dad's my hero. I grew up in a really fortunate, very traditional family. Like for a long time, I kind of thought that everyone's dad was their hero, and this is like another thing that I've learned is it's not the case. And so like I always kind of tried to relate it to people as if they would understand what I was talking about. And I've learned that, like, you know, some people don't have that relationship with their dad and whatever, but I jotted down 2 reasons that my dad's my hero. I think it's not an easy thing to say. You can look up to a father as a role model or whatever, but I have 2 memories that sort of explain why he's my hero. And I think I understand them more now than I did when they happened. At the time, I didn't really get them, but I knew that they were significant enough that they're treasured memories of mine. The first one was the first time I saw my dad cry. I remember being in bed. I was a kid. I was probably in primary school, and he came home late from work, and there was like a bit of commotion, and I was like, what's going on? Pardon me. Realized he was like in tears, and mum came in and said, oh, your dad was getting the bus home from work, so he would have been at Wynyard Station or whatever. Saw a homeless guy with a disability, offered to go in and buy him, you know, some McDonald's or whatever, and like he basically bought a guy like a pack of chips, and then the guy like dropped them in the gutter, and then was like very distressed that he dropped them. And my dad went back and was like, no, it's all right, I'll get you more and whatever. And then he got home and he broke down and cried about it, because I was like, I've never seen this, but like, what is going on? Like, this is my strong, stoic, masculine dad in tears. And he just couldn't comprehend, like, I guess how fortunate we were, but also the scenario that guy was in. And I didn't really, like, I didn't have the emotional capacity or like the mental capacity to really process that when I was a kid, but it always stuck with me, and it means way more to me now than it actually meant at the time. And then the second one was a day in high school where it's one of those days you just wake up and you're like, fucking not today. And my parents were like, there was no such thing as a sick day. It was like, if you're sick, you go to school, you go to sick bay, and they'll call us if you're actually sick, and then you can come home. I had to earn my sick days. Which I'm pretty grateful for. But I just really didn't want to go. I wasn't sick. I was just like, the closest word to it is probably depressed. Like, my dad was sick. I was in high school. I wasn't really enjoying it. You're in that like year 9 stage, so you don't know like who the fuck you are as a person. It's like testosterone and stuff pumping through your body. And I was at the bus stop waiting for the bus, and the bus came, and I just didn't hail the bus. I just let the bus go past, and I was like, I just fucking freaked out. And then I was like, I just need to go. I'm just going to go home and have to, like, I don't know, explain that I don't want to go to school. And I went home. I opened the door, and my dad was like there, and he was like, hey, what's going on? And I just started crying, and I was like, couldn't really get the words out. I was like, I just don't want to go to school today. And he was like, hey, that's fine. Like, that's okay. Like, I thought I was getting sent to school, and I just couldn't explain why I didn't want to go. And I don't even remember the conversation we had there, but I remember after a while, like, I sort of calmed down a bit, and we got in the car and we drove down to Manly Beach, and we sat in the car and just looked at the surf and had a chat. And like, again, I was young, there was a lot going on. I don't really remember what the conversation was, but in hindsight, that was the first time that someone told me it was okay to feel like that. Yeah. And I probably, like, subconsciously don't even realize how much of an impact that's had on what I'm doing now, or why I'm passionate about this stuff. Like, mental health wasn't even in my vocabulary at that point. Yeah. But I think he didn't even know what to say. He didn't know what to do. He just knew that he had to tell me that it was okay, and we were going to figure it out, and we'd have a conversation about it. And I think that's like, for now, it's like it's such a proud memory to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think he did it by accident, to be honest. Like, he had no fucking idea what he was doing. But that just had a huge impact on me. So those are the 2 reasons that he's a hero to me. Is like, he was such a fun-loving, infectious energy kind of guy. Like, I'm very much like that in that way. But it was these little intimate moments I had with him as like such a good father that I think really are why I'm so proud that he's a hero of mine. Yeah,
wow. That's incredible. But I guess that rolls us into the third question. What's the highlight or highlights?
This was actually harder than hardship and hero for me. Like, those ones are pretty straightforward. And I was thinking about it. It's not like, we're so bad at kind of acknowledging when we've done good or what our highlights are, I guess. And I've had plenty of highlights. I kind of think of like a highlight reel. Let's go back to sport. Like it's not about one big thing. If you're watching a highlight reel, it's like a clip of all the good things someone's done over their playing career. And I feel like the highlights of my life, there's like significant milestones that I've hit that definitely make up my highlight reel. But by far and away, starting 2 Minute Mates is the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. Going from telling a couple of mates at a barbecue that like we needed to be accountable for each other, and then experiencing in friendship groups the profound impact that me doing that has had on those groups. And then like having guys in those groups say to me, like, I don't think you realize how much this means. Like, and then say, I've got other groups of mates and we don't talk, like none of this shit gets brought up. Like, we don't talk about any of these things. We don't interact in the same way. And then after a while, it's like probably after like 18 months to 2 years of it, there was a tipping point where the Instagram page went from like likes and stuff from my friends or people I knew to like people I'd never heard of, or like getting messages from people saying like, hey, I love what you do. Let me know if I can support. Starting to open up, like people buying shirts and hats and like wearing a logo that I made up in my bedroom as like a 23-year-old kid. And starting to put the message onto other people is like, it still fucking blows my mind. Like it's just crazy that these were just ideas that I had, but they've stuck with people, and it's like had way more of an impact than I thought it would. And if it impacted one person, like I always say, that's enough. So I think like sometimes I just got to stop and reflect and go like, I still feel like I'm figuring shit out all the time, but I would tell anyone that like you don't have to make your own project or have your own brand or whatever to have that impact. Like if I'd done that as Ben the person, I think I still could have had the same impact. And that's probably the lesson for other people is like smash the glass, like break down the invisible barriers that we have put up around us, and then you find all this rich stuff behind it in your relationships and your friendships. That's the stuff that is like so fulfilling and rewarding. Like that's what when I talk about like purpose, that's where I see my purpose is like, now that I've discovered that for myself, it's like, how can I share this like abundance of, emotion and richness with other people, or how can I make them see that this sort of stuff is there?
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. I think another similarity with us is that my highlight on a personal level is starting Line and Length. I absolutely love it. So you can relate to what that feeling's like and that sense of self-pride that you have. Just your little idea, evolve.
Yeah, honestly, it just makes you like, it makes you stand up taller. Like you just, it's so hard to put into words. And I think you're right. That's like why when we got introed, I saw a lot of like what I've done or wanted to do and what you guys are doing. You're much better at structure and organization and posting stuff and doing podcasts than I am. But yeah, I think it's just, and to go back to the purpose thing, like something I read in a book recently was about like trying not to tell people to find a purpose, because it kind of has this feeling that we're born or we wake up with this like inherent desire to do something. Like it's my life's purpose to be a doctor, so we go to university and we study. And like if you don't want to be a doctor or medicine or law or something, it's not really clear for you what your purpose is. Like most people don't wake up and go, this is my purpose. And so we really struggle in trying to find something we're passionate about. And so this book was suggesting like, don't seek a purpose, seek creativity. Like I do my best work when I'm creative. Coming up with 2 Minute Mates and the concept of it only takes 2 minutes to check it, that was all creative work. And if you create stuff and express yourself and you put it out there, people react to it or they engage with it, and then there's a purpose behind it. But if you start with purpose, like you just end up in this fucking weird roundabout. And like I did that for years. I struggled with I trying to make sense of your father passing away as like a 16-year-old kid. Is just this endless search for purpose. It wasn't until I started being creative with what I like, how I could use it, that it actually sort of it became purposeful.
Yeah, love it.
I completely agree with that. And I relate to your story. I had a pretty much, I want to say identical, but every circumstance is different. But yeah, my dad passed away when I was 20 from bowel cancer as well. And it took me 10 years to work out what it is that I wanted to do. And I quit a job and I started doing a counseling degree because I want to help and impact mental health. And then Kels came up with Line and Length, and I wanted to get involved with that. And that's how this was all sort of born as well. So look, I agree. I think being creative is a great way to kind of find what helps drive you in life.
Well, Aiden, I'm sorry to hear about your dad, but I think it's great you found purpose in what you want to do.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Mate, you spoke there of the book that you were reading that kind of led you to not talk about, not ask people what their purpose was in life. We love to ask people, what sort of books would you recommend to people?
Yeah, that book that I read recently is called Love People, Not Things. And then there's like a byline that is because the other way around never works out or never whatever. Yeah. It's by like two guys who call themselves the Minimalists. They got a couple. They've written a few books and documentaries. One's on Netflix about like minimalism and this sort of concept that you can find more in having less. I'm very like I call myself a failing or practicing minimalist. People think of minimalism as this idea of like sitting in an empty apartment, not owning a TV and stuff, but it's not finding a sense of value or not seeking value in stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, and it's taken me ages to like disconnect from that, and I think part of finding value in stuff is you start to like think that your value is attached to other things. So it's like at its core, it's about sort of seeing value in yourself. Yeah. That was like a really good book that resonated with me. I'm a terrible reader. I love the idea of being able to absorb knowledge, but I listen to audiobooks mostly because I've got all signs of like an ADHD adult. I got tested as a child and they said I'm fine. I think I'm just highly strung with energy, but that's a really good book. And then the other book that I recommend to most people is The Resilience Project by Hugh and Kylenburg. He's
another one. We'll add you to the tally.
Yeah. Mate, it's and the crazy thing about that book is, or for me, is my life is like weirdly similar to his. Like I read that book and it felt like I was reading the book that I've always wanted to write, down to like, there's this weird parallel of like most of his life sounds like me, but then part of his life sounds like my dad. Like my dad went and played county cricket in England. That's what he did. And like there's all these weird parallels. And I said to my mum, hey, you've got to read this book. I didn't say I felt like it was me. And she called me and was like, this is so weird. I feel like you've written this. Like, I feel like this is you, but with your dad's like sort of background. Like, it's just bizarre. So I related to that book so much, but I think the message from it and the way that he puts it into practice with what he does is just so perfect and relatable for people. I think it's a really good starting point. Like if you're starting the journey of exploring this stuff or discovery or whatever, I think that's a great place to start. The other book, like Love People, Use Things, is probably like a bit further down the path. As I explain it, is like there's this sort of mental health journey or path that people are on. And sometimes I forget that I'm probably a few steps ahead of people on the path because of the experience I've had and how long I've sort of immersed myself in the space. Yeah. So I think the Resilience Project is a great starting point for anyone that wants to look into that stuff, especially stuff around gratitude is like so important. There's so much research behind how being grateful for things and taking time to recognize and acknowledge the good things in our life helps us actually seek out positives, not just get caught up on the negatives all the time because there's so many around us. So yeah, I think that's probably it sounds like you guys have had a few people say that, but it's probably the best starting point for people.
At this point, Ben, I think I'm the only person that's been on this podcast that hasn't read the Resiliency Project. So Kel spoke about it way back when we first started all of this. So I've put my order in. I'm going to finally read it.
Yeah, it's awesome. He's got
recommended it.
He's got another book coming out soon as well. So that'll be the top of my list soon. It'll be his second book.
Me too. Benny, on a personal level, how do you look after your lid? You know, what do you do on the daily reg that keeps you in shape?
I talk a lot about doing a whole bunch of stuff that I don't do myself. So I am the world's biggest hypocrite when it comes to mental health. But the things that I tell people to do all the time are the kind of like the staples, or the tried and true, or the proven things that we know work. So we know journaling is good. We know practicing gratitude is good. We know meditation's good. We know exercise and sunlight and healthy diets are good. You can read any number of books or blogs or conversations and people will tell you that sort of stuff. So those are good starting points, but I know that it's personal for everyone. I've never been good at exercise. Like I fucking hate exercise. I hate going for runs. I think I'm traumatized from doing like school cross country and stuff. Yeah. But I do it because I have to. I like competing. So I like team sport, like being competitive. But the other thing that I do is I just laugh every day. Like I worked at Ben & Jerry's, the ice cream store, for 5 years as a teenager. I was Ben from Ben & Jerry's. $1 for every time I heard that. Yeah. The bloody name tag on and everything. But their like tagline is, if it's not fun, it's not worth doing. Which sounds so weird to take like a mantra from an ice cream store, but I was just like, there's something in that more than just scooping ice cream, right? And so I just took this approach of like, if it's not fun, it's not worth doing. And if it isn't fun, my job or the game that I'm playing is how can I make this fun? So like sometimes that probably gets misconstrued as immaturity or not taking things seriously. So I'm trying to practice when I have to be mature, but I also know there's a whole bunch of shit in life that people take way too seriously that you can just lighten up a little bit and have a bit of fun with. And it makes every day better. Like sometimes I just put on music and dance to myself. Like I just make everything a game or an activity of like, how can I make this funny for me or someone else? And you just realize like there's so much shit. We just don't have to take that serious. Like we should just be having fun all the time. That's whatever fun looks like for you. Like sometimes for me, that's just like I've had a big day of work. I need to sit down and play Xbox and just chat shit with my mates and drink a beer. And if you look at the traditional things, that's like unhealthy of like what you should be doing for your mental health. Yeah. But I call it my commute at the moment because I'm not commuting to work. I'm not spending an hour on the bus watching shit on my phone or, reading a book or listening to a podcast. So I finish work and I just veg out and become a slob for an hour because that's my commute. That's my way I disconnect from work. Yeah. So there's certainly like the traditional things you can do, but just find the stuff that works for you. I would pin it around fun, like have something fun in your life. It gives you something to look forward to. It just makes everything a bit easier. And fun can be different for different people, but it doesn't always have to be like, we get caught in the trap of all this stuff so serious, like journaling about your feelings and whatever. And it's like, sometimes journaling for me is like 5 words, and then I'm like, "Fuck this, I'm done. Let's go kick a footy." Yep. It can be that,
Love it,
mate. What has this sort of podcast experience taught you? You said you wrote some notes down. What have you learned about yourself by coming on our podcast?
I think that for me personally, sometimes I realize that because I've been doing this stuff for a while, I think I have to like change my script or like talk about different stuff or like evolve the narrative. And I forget that, most people haven't heard this story for the first time. Like most people hearing my story for the first time, or basically everyone. So I've told it enough times to understand the things that are like valuable for people or the things that people can resonate with. So I try not to get like too complex or caught up in it all, which I think I do, just because of how I am. So I think what I've learned for me is like, it's a good reset to go like, just stick to your script of what you know that works, like share the message that relates with people. If I get too personal or too far down the path, as I was talking before, it's very like, my advice becomes very specific to people or mindsets that I've been in that I assume other people are in. So I've sort of tried to like generalize what I talk about, and just have fun with it. Like I'll go back to that, like making the joke about saying sorry about your father to you, Aiden. Like humor is a great way to deal with this kind of stuff, and show that it can be lighthearted is probably like something that I've learned. Even in like facilitating workshops and stuff, I got to points where I was like way too serious, and people come and say, let's jump in and talk about our feelings and stuff. And you can see people are like, what? Just a bit blindsided. Like not everyone's ready to have that conversation. Yeah. And I think that if we can make mental health a bit lighter and a bit fun, it's an easier buy-in for people. Like people want to enjoy or take entertainment and stuff. Like you can be really entertained and still see great value in something. So I think, and that probably started when we had a catch up the other day, Luke, and just the energy that I took away from that was like, I was just ready to go and be creative and do stuff. And I was like, fuck, I just love this stuff. Yeah. I need to surround myself with people that feel the same way and get energy from other people. Like, I think that's when I'm at my best, is not when I'm trying to do all this shit by myself. It's like, go on the journey with other people, get people involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Like with Line of Length, it's a team effort. I mean, it's not just me. We wouldn't be anywhere as big as what we are now if it wasn't, for everyone playing to their strengths. It's definitely not a one-man band, which is so good because I learn along the way. I learn from other people every day with Line of Length.
Yeah, it creates, and this works on multiple levels, but it creates accountability. Like most of the things that I do with 2 Minute Mates, I do them after I've posted about the fact I'm going to do them. And the only reason I post about them is because I'm like, now I'm accountable. Because it is just me. I have to create accountability because it's too easy for me to say, can't be bothered.
Yeah.
So yeah, and accountability is for work, for projects, for your mental health, for your friendships, like creating accountability. That's a personal value that I wrote down in my phone the other day. Like accountability is a personal value. I'm always updating my personal values. And I was like, that's something that I'm going to try and live out for the next couple of months or put a focus on is accountability. Because there's a lot of layers to accountability, but I think it's important for us to have.
Yeah, agreed. Final question for you, Benny. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
This is one of the things I wrote down. This is actually something, I don't have any tattoos. I kind of told myself I'd wait till I was 30 to get a tattoo. I would not be
getting a tat. No way.
But if I did, the problem is if I start, I'm going to end up like a fucking Bible passage. I'm going to have like scripture written all over me because I love like quotes and metaphors and mantras. Like I've mentioned a few in this podcast already because like that's stuff that it's sticky, like you get it and you go, I understand what that means. And it's memorable. I can hold on to that. And one that I landed on was what to do, not who to be. And I kind of evolved this from a book that I read by a guy called Ryan someone that I can't remember his last name, but he has two books. This is a quote from Ryan. He's got 2 books. One's called The Obstacle is the Way, which is about how the challenges or the tough path that we are on sometimes is the path to where we wanted to be, even though you don't see it at the time, which is a great one for adversity. And then the other book that he read is called Ego is the Enemy. And it's a concept that like our ego is what destroys us in the end. And so how to remain sort of grounded and selfless and all those things. And so I kind of morphed it myself from his books, but the concept of what to do, not who to be, is that life is about what you do, not who you are. And I mentioned that like seeking that sense of like purpose or what, like find something that you're passionate about or what's your purpose is like this fucking violent roundabout you can get stuck in. I was so insecure or like, probably insecure for such a long time about who I was and how I told myself that like everything happens for a reason. I'm going to be successful and I'm one of a kind. And like, I was telling myself this shit from when I was like 10 for some reason. It's a lot of stress to put on yourself and then it wasn't until I read those books that I realized like, this is way too much based around what people are going to think about me, not what I actually do. Yeah. And like, if you do the right things or you do stuff, like if you put things out there and you focus on the work, the rest of it takes care of itself. But also like the rest of it doesn't matter. I'm always trying to keep myself in check that I don't need gratification from people. It's not about being the funniest guy in the room all the time. It's like I'm to go back to being Australia's most generic bloke. I feel all those things, but everyone does. Like everyone has imposter syndrome and like all of that shit is caught up in what people think about us. Yeah. Which at the end, like, which I've realized it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's
so hard to learn that, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it sounds like you're very comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah, I am. And I wasn't for ages. And when I wasn't, I was toxic to people. I was probably a fucking asshole. Like the shortcut answer for what I would tell my 18-year-old self is like, hey, like your mistakes don't matter. Like stop worrying what people think about you, or like stop, just say yes to shit and like everything's going to be okay. But like the stuff under that is like, it was just like ego and insecurity. Everyone has that stuff, and I let that get the best of me because I didn't know how to deal with the grieving and the trauma that I'd been through, I guess. And it's good to be able to remind yourself about that stuff in hindsight, but you got to do the work. Like you got to do the work on yourself, on your projects, and that shit's hard, but it's like, it is rewarding. And it's kind of like, at the end of the day, it's all we have. Like that's the end of the day. That's all I have. That is me. That's to go back to the first question. Like, who's Ben? That's all this shit I've talked about is me. This is who I am as a person.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Awesome answer there, Ben. I think that's a really good place to wrap the podcast up today, guys. To anyone who's listening, 2minutemates.com or at 2minutemates on Instagram. That's where you can find sort of anything that Ben posts, or anything if you want to go and check it out. There's some really awesome content on there. I highly recommend having a look at it. Ben, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and your journey with us today on the podcast.
Thanks, guys. I get a bit ranty sometimes, so apologies, but
not ranty at all, mate. Not ranty at all.
I'm sure you can probably tell I just love this stuff, man. I think and thanks so much for giving me the platform to share it, and like I'm in awe of what you guys are doing as well. So hopefully it's not the last chat that we have, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck in behind the scenes with you guys and helping where I can as well. So
bloody oath, we'll be linking up for sure. 2 Minute Mates and Line of Length.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking
might have to crack out that left arm again.
For the audience out there, Benny's coming down to Tumbarumba, which is our next Line of Length event in January, and let's see how this left arm swingers.
Bowling nothing but short stuff at a charity event.
I'll be wearing a lid.
Yeah, I think I'll have to as well. Mate, thank you very much. To anyone who's listening, if you want to be a part of Line and Length, please reach out to anyone who's involved, myself, Kel, anyone who's been on the podcast, Instagram page, our Facebook page, any of that sort of stuff. We'd love to hear your story if you're comfortable sharing it with us. But look, that's it for this week, and we look forward to hearing from you all later.
We better give a big shout out to our podcast producer there, Stuart McMillan in Melbourne.
Thank you very much, Stu, for doing all the editing for us, mate. We really appreciate it. And that's it from us.